سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح وبث الدعاء الخفي الصريح.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to our two-part series on atheism, the denial of God. Took some time to come up with that title, but I feel it's fitting for what we're going to discuss. Again, as usual, we have our Telegram channel here, which you can join if you have the Telegram app, and it will obviously give you lots more videos, discussions on topics of this nature. Part 1 is Atheism is Dead, Long Live Atheism. We have now something called New Atheism. So in reality, what I'm saying is taking from the Shakespearean, the king is dead, long live the king. Has it really disappeared? Has something new really appeared? And that's really the sort of aim and push for part 1. Now, when we're going to compare with atheism, then we need to compare the faith with atheism, because atheism stands against other faiths. But obviously I won't necessarily have all the time here to discuss every single faith in comparison with atheism. So we're going to have to pick the fundamentals of faith and then compare them with atheism. So we've got a number of choices. We have obviously Judaism, in which Yahweh, the name that's given to God, or we can have Christianity, in which the English word is God, or Islam, in which the Arabic word Allah is used. Now, with respect to Judaism, we have the Tanakh, which is a book around 450 before Common Era. So this is the earliest text that's available to us, a text which speaks of the faith-based position that it adopts. Within Christianity, we have another name that's given to Tanakh, which is the Old Testament. And then we have the New Testament, which was sort of put together approximately 80 Common Era. There's various opinions ranging anything between 80 and 96 Common Era. And finally, we have Islam, that recognizes the text that came previous to it. So it recognizes the Tanakh as the Torah, but the modified Torah, and it recognizes the New Testament originally being the Injil, but now the modified Injil. And then it has a text which is the Quran, which was revealed over a period of time. Now, this is the last message in which God speaks to man. So if we take the Christian sort of adaptation of texts, we have Old Testament, New Testament, then arguably if we wanted to put something there, it would be Final Testament. And we're going to explain again why we feel, and obviously my expertise is in this area as well, why we're going to pick Islam, because most of the work that's gone on with atheism, it's been in comparison to Christianity, much so, because the big push of new atheism in particular is coming from individuals of a Christian background. There is some work obviously that's going in from a Jewish background, and now you're starting to see work coming from the Islamic background, but very much so the new atheism push is from within Christianity. So the arguments are very much within Christianity. But if we take the Islamic view that, look, 450 BCE is several hundred years after Musa alayhi salatu wasalam spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or spoke to God, or spoke to Yahweh, as the Jews would say. And if we look at the New Testament, then that's been put together 80 or so years after Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, Jesus, spoke to God or spoke to Allah. Whereas the Quran itself was being documented verbatim as it was being revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for that reason, and the fact that there is this view which is substantiated by the fact that the books weren't recorded as they were being, it was an oral tradition, they weren't being recorded as they were spoken, pushes us to accept that if we're going to discuss atheism, then and how it challenges and its arguments against faith, then that seems to be the more accurate, in the sense that it was recorded at the time of revelation. Not that wasn't the case in the other two faiths. It is considered as the last time that Allah spoke to man. That's another reason. And it's a message which is global. But again, we'll touch upon this later on. So for that reason, during today's discussion, during these two parts, we're going to very much focus on Islam and compare atheism with Islam. So new atheism, we hear it being bandied around. What is this new atheism? Well, there's certain individuals who are the main sort of drivers of this new atheism, main shepherds, and I use these words intentionally, main prophets of atheism. First, we have Richard Dawkins, who was the former Oxford Professor of Public Understanding of Science, and his book, The God Delusion, which has been very much so the start of this push towards challenging religion in general and this title of new atheism. Stephen Hawking has very much so got involved. Initially, we see from his earlier texts, he just seems to suggest that there is space for God, if I can use that word. But then we start to see a change in his tone in his later book, The Grand Design. Christopher Hitchens, another individual, professor of liberal studies, wrote a book called God is Not Great in 2008. And these are the three. There are others, and this is not an exhaustive list of individuals who are the main proponents of new atheism, but they suffice as an example, and also because they're the main key individuals to produce their argumentation and present their arguments and present their statements would be a fair reflection on what we can term new atheism. And again, Richard Dawkins is there at the top for a reason, because he is the main drive towards this new atheism. So Dawkins is pushing for this revival. He says, even if they can't be herded, cats in sufficient numbers can make a lot of noise and they cannot be ignored. Now, it's an interesting point he makes there, because what he's saying is he's talking about new atheists, that or atheism in generally, or atheists generally, that they can't be herded together, meaning that they don't agree on many things and they disagree. And this is a fair point, because there are many atheists who don't like the language and the tone that new atheists are developing, because to them, like to people of faith, they seem to be just another religion, another ideology, another belief system. So hence he says, if they cannot be herded, then cats in sufficient number can make a lot of noise and they cannot be ignored. Now, throughout this text, as we have already chosen to use Islam as the faith to compare new atheism to, I will be using verses of the Quran. Now, the Quran is a revealed text, as we've already mentioned, the spoken word of Allah, the spoken word of God, the uncreated word of God, which is recorded and contained within a book which is referred to as the Quran. And these are available to public from anywhere, literally, Islamic bookshops, but even now, your average mainstream bookshops, it's available for individuals to get either in the Arabic or in the translations in many, many languages. I will obviously quote to you the verse, and then I will translate the verse to you. So the key thing which comes about here is Dawkins mentioning this lack of unity amongst atheists. And we see a verse in the Quran which very much says that تَحْسَبُهُمْ جَمِيعًا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ شَتَّى ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَوْمٌ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. That you will consider them to be all together, that they are agreed on their views and they don't disagree. However, their hearts are separate. And it's interesting that the word hearts is mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not the minds, because this is a key point that I want to make, because throughout today's part, these new atheists have this view that it's the mind which is dictating the heart. That is the mind which is clean, not affected by strange beliefs, as they would word them, not affected by anger or emotion, as they would suggest, but it's just the mind which is clear and is coming to these kind of decisions with thought and with using the scientific model, and therefore it is free from the taints and free from emotions and free from desires. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not describe them in that way. He says, وَقُلُوبُهُمْ شَتَّى. It's their hearts which don't agree, because this is not, as you will see hopefully in today's part and in the part which follows, you will see that this is not about the mind over the heart, that this is very much the heart controlling the mind. Why? ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَوْمٌ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. That is because there are people who don't understand, who don't reason properly, who don't reason accurately. Again, a very interesting word which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses. And when I mention this word Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what that basically means is Allah, as we've already mentioned, is the name of God. Subhanahu wa ta'ala means glory be to him, the Almighty. So it's a habit. So if you do hear it, don't panic. It's just the word that Muslims refer to as God is Allah. It's just another name. It's an Arabic name. That's all. God is the English name. So we address him by the name he prefers, and which is Allah. And also subhanahu wa ta'ala is just to acknowledge his greatness. So if you do hear that, then that's what I'm saying. And the reason why I've got the Arabic there is because these videos are being viewed by Muslims as well. So at least they can reference the particular verse that I'm speaking about. And also I wanted to avoid getting translations of these verses, which are available. Reason being is individuals will read into them, and I wanted to give my own version to you, which obviously stands linguistically absolutely accurate. So this is what, so تحسبهم جميعا وقلوبهم شتى ذلك بأنهم قوم لا يعقلون. So this is what we're referring to, that they've got this view. But it's an interesting point I'd like to make as well, is that let's not forget the Quran was revealed 1400 years ago. So individuals will be saying, well, hold on a second here. Why is it a book that was revealed 1400 years ago is speaking about people's behavior, which is happening now, since possibly 2005, 2006 on? Well, we'll see that the change actually happened in 2001. But why? This is the miraculous nature when you hear Muslims speak of the miraculous nature of the Quran, because it's applicable for all times. And that, in a way, I've hinted at by giving a clue as to how new this atheism is. So, new atheism. Now, we saw a big push back in 2009, when, particularly in London, we saw lots of buses, and Dawkins himself actually put his hand in his pocket to give towards this, which was this bus advertisement going around which said, there's probably no God, now stop worrying and enjoy your life. And I've picked up on this because this was also by the British Humanist Association. I've picked up on this because this is a very relevant point which was very public. And great thought went into this, because if you do go to the British Humanist Association website, you'll see that this wasn't just sort of picked together by chance. They put a lot of time and effort and energy into it to make sure the message was easy to understand by the general masses, short and sweet, and also made a point. So they did, this deliberated over this. So as it's something which is now in the public domain, and it's something which was pushed upon the masses, and that I'm not here now to give you a very deep lecture on the sort of Kalami issue and the cosmological issues, and to reason in terms of trying to determine the existence of God. Otherwise, it's too deep, and it's probably going to benefit a small percentage of people. But my aim for these two lectures is to try to make this as accessible, as is my way, is try to make matters which are possibly complicated as accessible to the people as possible. So there was great thought which went into this. So why the word probably? There's probably no God. If you're quite confident as an atheist, I can say quite confidently as a believer that there is a God, and I can say that confidently. And as a Muslim, I can say that his name is Allah, and I can say this very confidently. I have no concerns whatsoever. But why the word probably? Well, Dawkins admits that this cannot be proven. and is a position of faith to say that there's probably no God. So that's an interesting point. As we'll see, Dawkins and his pals are pushing towards the view that science is the answer to all our problems, and science can determine these things. Well, he himself is admitting here now that science can't prove either the existence of God as he perceives it, or the non-existence of God. And then to ridicule this further, he will say, well, science can't prove that Thor didn't exist. Science can't prove that there's little angels at the bottom of your garden. Science can't, sort of prove that leprechauns don't exist, or this doesn't exist, or that doesn't exist. So he ridicules it. And you'll see this very much, a reduction ad absurdum attitude, which new atheists take, where they take the argument to a point of ridicule in order to prove the point, which is, as those of us who've studied critical thinking and argumentation will know, it's a fallacy. The next point is now stop worrying. So there seems to be a suggestion that believing in a God causes you to worry. Okay. And so this is an assumption that he's making here, or the assumption that they are making here. I don't want to just put all this at Dawkins' doorstep, because this is a British Humanist Association is a huge organization and is one of many across the world. So their view then is that faith actually makes you worry. That's an assumption. Does this sound like a scientific way so far? How scientific is this statement? First of all, we've had the point on probably, which it's beyond the remit of science, yet still he feels confident and they feel confident to speak about it. Now stop worrying. Again, it's an assumption that faith is a cause of worry. Was any research carried out to determine if faith causes individuals to worry? Enjoy your life. Okay. Again, it's another assumption that life cannot be enjoyed if a person believes in God. Now, we have a number of articles. I wonder if this works. Oh, it does. Goodness me. So here we go. I'm not really a Daily Mail sort of chap. But I won't click on that link because it sometimes opens up, sort of adverts which are inappropriate. So I'm going to leave that there. But what I will do, I have another link as well. Religion can make you happier. And if I click on this link, religion can make you happy, if everything is working fine. Got too many. We have there, table there, no religion rather 7.58, but all others 7.86, 7.61, 7.74, 7.64, all other religions are clearly suggesting that they make individuals happier. And there's much written in there. According to figures published as part of the Office for National Statistics, ONS, well-being research program, people who say they have no religious affiliation report lower levels of happiness, life satisfaction, and self-worth than those who do. Yet conversely, non-religious Britons also report lower levels of anxiety. So there is some anxiety, but we're focusing here on levels of happiness. So what we've proved is the argument that now stop worrying, this assumption that faith is a cause of worry, okay, and doesn't make an individual happy. So you have to only become happy when you are. Now we have touched upon anxiety, concerns. But we're talking here about enjoying your life, which only comes about due to not being content with one's life. So we've seen a couple of articles there, and there's others as well, which show that religion actually makes an individual happier, has more self-worth, is more content with their life. There may be aspects which were mentioned there, conversely, that this can make a person sometimes anxious. Anxious being, well, obviously, if you believe in the existence of a God, one is always sort of thinking, am I doing enough? Am I living up to the principles that God requires from me, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires from me? Am I doing that? So there will always be a level of anxiety. That's not our focus here. Well, our focus here is self-worth, happiness, contentment with life. And it's suggesting that that's only going to come about when there's probably no God. Doesn't seem that this whole thing is very scientific. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about individuals of this new atheism? Again, he mentions it. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ مُسْتَحَبُّ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا عَلَى الْآخِرَةِ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْكَافِرِينَ. That is because indeed they love the life of this world. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning, Allah mentions the rationale behind this view they're adopting. Remember, the impression that new atheists want to give, or atheists want to give, that this has got nothing to do with the heart, this has got nothing to do with desires, this has got nothing to do with wishes, this is clear, clean, clinical science. That's all this is. Whereas we've seen so far from the slide before that that's far from clear clinical science. And we've also seen when Allah speaks about them that these are the people whose hearts are not agreed, and it's the hearts which is going towards. So again, preference is not an issue of science. Preference is about making a choice. Okay, making a choice. So they choose the life of this world over the hereafter. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not guide a people who renegade. Kafirin are those who deny him. Those who, and this is one of the reasons why I chose the title for this whole series, is the denial of God. It's a religion which is based upon the denial of God. It's a belief system which is based upon the denial of God. We have another verse as well, very similar tone. الَّذِينَ يَسْتَحِبُّونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا عَلَى الْآخِرَةِ. That they are those who prefer the life of this world over the hereafter. وَيَسُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And they stop from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَبْغُونَهَا عِوَجًا. And they seek within it faults. أُولَٰئِكَ فِي ضَلَالٍ بَعِيدٍ. And they are in a far deviation. Just going to pause there for a second. Slide's gone ahead. So anyway, I won't actually pause it for a second. I'm going to trust that this is getting recorded. It's just that I've noticed that my recording devices have all disappeared. But don't panic. Inshallah, it's getting recorded. Inshallah, meaning by the will of Allah, it will be getting recorded. So we mentioned new atheism. Okay, where's this new title come from? New atheism. Why was there a need to rebrand itself? What's changed? Well, nothing and everything. Nothing and everything. Nothing has changed, because I've quoted you verses referring to people that had existed in the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which means peace and salutations be upon him, that were revealed at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and also events which had taken place before Prophet Muhammad. So in essence, nothing has changed. This dialogue, this argument, this position, this system has existed since the time of man. So there's nothing new. There's nothing progressive happening. That's the argument which atheists and new atheists want to give in particular, is that, look, atheism is a progression of man, Humans progress. It's a basic level of human mindset in which, first of all, they must believe in everything being a god. So arguably, they could say that polytheism was the basic form of man's thinking, that everything was his god. The river was his god, the sun was his god, the trees were his god. Everything was his god, and he would ask everything for his needs day to day, because he had needs day to day. He needed to have a good hunt before he went out. He needed to make sure that his family was protected from wild animals. He was too much not in control of his surroundings, so he lived in housing which would easily get damaged. He was affected by natural disasters like floods and earthquakes. We've moved on from there now. We've progressed from there now. We can control our environment. We can control our foods. We're safe. We have things like insurance, which even protects us even at the time of need. So we've kind of done away with God. So that's the argument that new atheists want to give. But nothing has changed, as we will see throughout verses. But then everything has changed. Everything has changed because atheism was a view that individuals would adopt. and not preach. This is something that they would adopt. But now you see a very aggressive, a very anti-religion, a very ex-so-and-so, ex-so-and-so, a preaching. I use that word. So new atheists are preachers, and they're preaching this new religion of atheism, and this is what they're trying to spread. So in that respect, everything has changed, because you didn't see that type of open atheistic attitudes even in the last few decades. I've already touched upon this impression of change, impression of progression. Atheists want to give that view that things are changing for the better. We're progressing. And as we're progressing, God, Allah, has less and less impact on our lives, until eventually there's no need for God. There is no need for Allah. But we'll see that there will always be a need for Allah, irrespective of our progression within the worldly understanding of the term. Here you go, statements again, and these are attributed most likely to Dawkins, and if there are to others, I will mention them. Don't kid yourself that you're going to live again after you're dead. You're not. Make the most of the one life you have got, live it to the full. Again, can you not see what's already been mentioned, the preference given to this life? Presumably what happened to Jesus was what happens to all of us when we die. We decompose. Now, these are statements being made in the 2000s, okay? Do they call them noughties or something? In the 2000s, let me stick to my term if I can. Okay, these are statements being made by people then. It seems to suggest that we've now freed ourselves from the shackle of blind faith, and we have reached the high point of understanding that we've reached this conclusion. It gives the impression, doesn't it? Well, hold on a second here. Let's see some verses of the Quran which were revealed over 1400 years ago. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, and those who denied the existence of Allah, kafaru, that's what the word kafaru means, to deny, to cover truth, to deny the truth. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَإِذَا كُنَّا تُرَابًا وَآبَاؤُنَا أَإِنَّا لَمُخْرَجُونَ, that when we become dust and our forefathers are dust, are we then going to be taken out alive again? Can you see the similarities? It's absolutely, it's like a verbatim recording that Allah makes of their statements. Any others? Of course. لَقَدْ وُعِدْنَا هَذَا نَحْنُ وَآبَاؤُنَا مِنْ قَبْلُ. Indeed, we were also threatened with this. We were promised that, oh, this is what's going to happen, that we were going to die and we were going to be resurrected. In hadha illa asatirul awwalin. These are not except fairy tales, fables, myths. Surprisingly, when you hear these words, it is exactly how the new atheists describe the revealed text. By chance? وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ مَاذَا أَنزَلَ رَبُّكُمْ قَالُوا أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. When they say, okay, fine, you say that there is no God, you say that there is no Allah, you're saying that, there was no prophet, then what is it that you sent down? Then what is this book that we have with us, that we use, the Quran? They say, Asatir al-Awwalin. These are just fables and myths and tales which people have put together. قَالُوا أَإِذَا مِتْنَا وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا وَإِذَامًا أَإِنَّا لَمَبْعُوثُونَ. That when we die and we become dust and bones, deteriorated bones, are we then going to be resurrected? If you can't see the similarities in the statements which Allah records and what people are saying, then something's amiss here. Something is amiss here. Are we really seeing progression? Have we really progressed from the people that Allah speaks about 1400 years ago? And He speaks about those who came even before Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Has things changed? Really? And these are only some verses. I want to say that because I should have said that when I first recorded a verse, that I've not gone and tried to collect every single verse which proves the particular point that I'm trying to make. In most cases, I've picked one or two, but in some cases, I've picked more than one or two to show that there is a lot more. There's over 6,000 verses in the Quran, over 6,000 verses. So, literally you're spoiled for choice in terms of, because it was going to tell Muslims what's going to happen in the future. There is no point in having a text, a revealed text, if it's not going to help you through life. So Muslims obviously believe that the Quran will continue to guide them, and it will continue to guide other people until the end of days. And again, I'll speak about that possibly in part 2. So let's carry on with the same conversation. So when I said nothing and everything, well, there was the nothing slide. Nothing has changed, and then everything has changed. 9/11. Many of us saw religion as harmless nonsense. Beliefs might lack all supporting evidence, but we thought if people need a crutch for consolation, where's the harm? September the 11th changed all that. Hitchens. Again, this is after 9/11. I am not an atheist as much as I am an anti-theist. Tone is changing. Dawkins. I am utterly fed up with the respect we have been brainwashed into bestowing upon religion. I think religion should be treated with ridicule, hatred, and contempt, and I claim that right. This is Haggerty quoting Hitchens. So things have changed. Notice something. If these are not extremist views, if these are not views of hatred, if these are not views, just because these individuals are clever to that respect, that they won't target a particular religion, they will make statements which are general, so as to avoid, for example, we've just seen now Stephen Fry in Ireland making some statements. He's another very staunch new atheist, as I would describe him, as are others. I forgot the chap's name. Another comedian who's a very staunch new atheist. It's no longer a point of, look, if that's what they want to believe, then fine, that's their choice, and I'll believe this. It's no longer that. This is now an all-out war on religion, an all-out war on religion. And this is extremism in religion. I choose that word religion intentionally because, as I will continue to describe to you, new atheism is nothing but a religion. And this is just the new world that we live in, post the 1990s and into the 2000s, where, and I will say, global powers destabilized key parts of the world. And this destabilization has resulted then in a reactionary, extreme reaction. And this extreme reaction then of extremism has now led to, so extremism has come from both sides, as you can see with this particular point here. But there's interesting points. If I can just go back a slide. The interesting point is that it seems to suggest that many of us saw religion as harmless nonsense. Well, they've clearly, Dawkins has clearly forgotten about the days of the Crusades and also what went on in medieval Europe when the Catholic Church was going and was being pitted up against by many people. So there was a lot of killing there, but he seems to have sort of cherry-picked his history. But then, or was that because it was a Christian harm going on, and Christians are permitted to do so? So, this is, he's a man of science, or he claims to be a man of science, and he says here, many of us saw religion as harmless nonsense. My goodness, the killings which went on by the Crusaders and the killings which went on under the name of religion in Europe in the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries and around that kind of period was huge. Many people, individual killed, but he refers to that as harmless nonsense. But then 7/11, hold on, is that because Muslims actually were involved, or it's alleged that these 4 individuals that were involved, or 10 individuals that were involved, that flew these planes in? So is that the case? Is it because Muslims have now actually killed people? Is that why this is suddenly turned? So if you're a man of science, Dawkins, then why are you treating all religions as the same? If you should be treating them equally the same, because you're a man of science. You're not a man who follows his heart. Do these look like statements made by people following their minds, or does this look like statements made by people following their heart? I'm utterly fed up. I think religion should be treated with ridicule, hatred, and contempt. What is that? A man of science? Is that really so, that the individuals should be treated with ridicule and hatred? Does it sound very scientific to you? Doesn't, does it? No. So why then? So this is all, and we're going to beginning to see now that the argument that new atheists are putting forward is falling apart. Let's look at war deaths. And I did kind of randomly pick these numbers. There's no particular reason why I picked the Napoleonic Wars and the Korean Wars. And it was just sort of, it seemed the numbers were easy for me to calculate. When I gather this data together, you can see that the total number of deaths that have occurred due to not religious wars, but the total number of deaths which have occurred just due to power, resources, and the normal things that people fight over is just short of 150 million. 150 million. Right, 150 million. But this doesn't disturb Dawkins and Hitchens. This doesn't upset them at all, because 150 million people dying over land is justified. 150 million people dying, particularly when you look at World War II, which was based with Germany, which was the most advanced scientific nation that existed at that time, and arguably Germany is quite advanced even now, even though they're one of the most advanced nations that ever existed on the face of the earth, were the cause of that war. If we take the Allies' perspective of it, they were the cause of that war. Yet these wars, even though 150 million people died, were not considered as seriously problematic enough for Dawkins and his pals to stand up and not only think that this is wrong, but also believe that it's wrong. Yet, after 9/11, everything changed, he said. Well, let's see. What I've managed to gather here is the terrorism deaths, and I've used the word terrorism because that's how it's been recorded. This is not my use of language. This is the language that these were recorded under. 1975 to 2000, this should be 2015 rather. Sorry about that. A little bit of a typo problem there. 2015 in Western Europe. Okay. These include and these are actually in the majority the IRA, ETA, RAF, which is a Red Army faction, and neo-Nazis. So again, not very, unless you look at IRA, again, people will sometimes say, well, that's a religious-based argument. Is it really? Is really religion at play there, or is this a case of land or politics? ETA clearly isn't, that clearly isn't, and that clearly isn't. This is not religious. So here we go. So when we look at these figures, this is 1971 all the way up to 2016, and you can see that the great majority are in the other. So when people like the IRA, ETA, RAF, and neo-RAF, meaning the Red the Red Army faction, the reason why I'm explaining that, not to be confused with the Royal Air Force, you can see here that the numbers for other is significantly higher. Significantly higher. And you do see some, as it's termed, Islam inspired, or as I will refer to it as, again, this is not my data, as I refer to it as the perversion of Islam. So it's not Islam inspired. Islam doesn't inspire killing. People inspire killing. People try to read into Islam as they see fit, perverted way, like we're seeing here now with the new atheists reading into science as they choose. And we can see here, for instance, the number of deaths which are involved from Islam inspired, and then you're starting to see a bigger growth, and you're starting to see here a little blip as well. When I did look at the American data, because 9/11 obviously took place in the USA, when I did look at the American data, it was very much a flat line until obviously you have 9/11, in which there's a huge peak there. There is something again in the 90s as well, when the Trade Center was attacked then. And you see this huge peak there at that particular point. So again, cherry picking, not looking at data effectively, and then claiming that they're scientific. So atheism, is it a faith or is it anti-faith? We're beginning to see that. Is it really anti-faith? Is it against all faiths? Is it against all beliefs? Or is it really a belief system in itself? Well, BHA website said, saying there's no God is taking a faith position, it quoted Dawkins. But in the 2006 conference, which was Beyond Belief, Science, Religion, Reason and Survival, they wanted to address 3 questions. Should science do away with religion? Now, what does that mean? Science, what is science? Is it a creature? what is science? What is it? How is it going to do away with religion? Are the two competing for the same things or something here? Seems to suggest that. What would science put in religion's place? Oh, so I see. So science now dictates what a person should actually believe in. Can we be good without God? Very interesting questions. And this was picked up by the New Scientist. Oh, I'm going to head by a slide there. This was picked up by the New Scientist, in which they argued that we should replace God with science, and we should replace religion with the scientific process, and we should replace religious expert with scientists. That was the supposed nice system. And again, when you have these people who sit on the fence, it does look reasonable. You think, well, look, science is rational, it's sound, and whatever. Scientific process is proven. Scientists are honest. Do you see how we kind of get led into this conflated understanding, which we will see as we progress? And then the close the door with any reconciliation Hitchens does. All attempts to reconcile faith with science are consigned to failure and ridicule. Really, Hitchens? Well, we'll see. Okay, because I will attempt to do that, exactly that exercise itself. Because I take up that, what can you say, that challenge that Hitchens puts forward, consigned to failure and ridicule. Well, let's see. So is science a substitute for Allah? Well, I am against religion because it teaches us to be satisfied with not understanding the world. Now, I've put in here two kind of broad approaches. Okay, one, as I've termed, the empirical method. Sorry about that. One that I've considered as the, I hope no more little reminders and things start popping up, especially not embarrassing ones. Two broad approaches. One is the empirical method, which is based on observation. So it's looking at the world around us and it's carrying out tests. And I've also termed that as inductive. And then we have the rational model, which is very much internal, which we hypothesize and we try to think. Now, I know the induction and deductive don't really fit perfectly, but it was another way to try to kind of separate the two. But we'll see as I progress. Oops, sorry. So let me just trigger happy there. Let me just go back. So the empirical method is based on observations. We look outside at the world. We look at our body. We carry out tests on our body. We can determine what the heart is, what its purpose is. We look at the kidneys, what its purposes are. We look at the lungs. So we can carry out tests and we can explore the body and try to understand the body better. And from that, we can then make theories, because I might only carry out tests on 3 bodies, or I might only carry out tests on 3 animals, and from that I can extract theories that if I was to give this type of medicine to this creature, then this is the result. Therefore, every time I give this medicine to all creatures, it will produce that. So we're going from the specific observations to theories. We can then test these tentative hypotheses, make this medicine, and now that I've given medicine as an example, and try that out. But it's not restricted just to medicine. It can be applied to anything, okay, anything at all. And then we have a theory, okay? The rational model is slightly different. We start with a theory, or we start with and then which leads to a hypothesis. And then we can observe this theory or hypothesis in either directly or indirectly, to which we then confirm. Now, these don't seem to be a substitute for a God. These don't seem to be a substitute for Allah. They're just a means to ascertain knowledge. How can a means to ascertain knowledge substitute a God? It doesn't make sense. It's irrational. It's not sound. Again, we're seeing, non-rational, non-scientific statements being made by the so-called scientific world. And I say the word so-called scientific world because it's as though they have a monopoly. It's as though people of an atheist background have a monopoly over science, which is not the case, which should never be the case. Because in other words, they are means. having this rational model, theorizing and trying to determine those theories out in the real world, or observing things in the real world. These are means to an end to determine something. They're not what is sought. So we need to ask this question: who is then the God for atheists? Because it's clearly not science. That's one question. Well, let's before we answer that question, is the Quran against the scientific process? Well, let's see, because we've already detailed the scientific process. Does the Quran not allow people to research? Does the Quran stop people from trying to determine and understand the world around them? Does it do that? Well, you've got a number of verses there. And this is just on the empirical model. أَفَلَا يَنْزُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ. And I apologize for the verse numbers which have sort of appeared randomly in the middle of a verse. The reason for that is because I'm mixing both Arabic and non-Arabic, in this case numerals, and as a result it's just kind of confused it. So my apologies for that. That's only happened whenever I'm quoting a couple of verses, not the case when I'm quoting an individual verse. So I apologize for that, but I'm sure it's quite clear to see. Do they not look? Now yanzuruna is not just to look, it's to take on board, to analyze, to assess. Do they look towards the camel, how it is created? Is this just asking, is Allah through the Quran just asking people to blindly believe in him without putting any evidence whatsoever for his existence? Is that what he's doing? Is the Quran against the scientific process? Well, this is clearly the empirical model. Look at the camel, how it's been created. Look at the sky, how it is raised above, and sky would be the immediate sky, and also looking out into space. How things are there, the moon where it is, the stars where they are. وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ, and the mountains, how they form together. So now we're pushed towards geology, the movement of the crust on the mantle, and how mountains are formed. وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ, and the earth, how it is spread out. So does this look like a religion which is just asking individuals to blindly accept it? Does Islam, does the Quran go against the scientific process? وَلَقَدْ تَرَكْنَا مِنْهَا آيَةً بَيِّنَةً لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ, and indeed we have left in there, amongst it, clear signs for the people who understand. Is this asking for individuals just to be like sheep, to just accept a word, لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ, for the people who reflect, for the people who rationalize? أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَتَكُونُ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا أَوْ أَذَانٌ يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا فَإِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارُ وَلَكِنْ تَعْمَى الْقُلُوبُ الَّتِي فِي الصُّدُورِ. Do they not go on the land? أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا, do they not go on the land? Well, why would you go on the land? So that you can see with your eyes, you can see the trees, you can see the rivers, you can see the mountains, you can see animals, so that you can actually go and explore. فَتَكُونُ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا. Do they not have hearts then which can understand this? Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the heart, because the heart controls the mind. So science is not just, because science, as I will prove to you later, is amoral. It doesn't have a moral compass at all. And we'll see how individuals with perverted understandings and perverted thoughts have taken science and used it and taken advantage of other humans. لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا أَوْ أَذَانٌ, or do they have ears by which they can hear? For indeed, it's not their sight which is blind, meaning it's not their scientific method which is a problem. The empirical method is fine. What the problem is their hearts which are blind. They're not willing to accept what they see in front of them. They will give you a ridiculous statement in order to justify their position, but won't accept what's right in front of their very eyes. Why? Why? Will not accept a creator. I'm not going to get too scientific, because I do hope to run another 2-part series on evolution, in which I will describe more in detail the reason why even the evidence is there. The evidence, for example, to the start of the universe. We know that the universe had a starting point. That goes completely against the view that things have always been the way they are, they always will be the way they are, nothing will change. It goes completely against that view. It shows that the universe had a start, that it never existed, and then it was brought into existence. Well, what was the rationale? What was the cause which brought that universe into existence? Now they can call it what they like, they can give it a different name, but that's just names that they are naming themselves, when God himself refers to in the Quran as Allah, as the initiator of the universe. Khair, we carry on. We carry on. وَفِي الْأَرْضِ آيَاتٌ, and there are upon the earth signs, لِلْمُوقِنِينَ, for those who have belief, sound belief in Allah, sound belief in God. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ, and they have signs within themselves. The human body, the eye, for example, is remarkable. The way, the tongue, how it can determine different tastes is remarkable. The ability to have the body, packed in the way it's packed, our intestines, our kidneys, the way they operate is remarkable, because Allah says, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ, in themselves. أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, do you not see? Wait a minute. Is this not asking humans to look and to explore and to research? Of course it is. Is the Quran going against the scientific process? That's what the atheists tell us. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. Soon we will show them our signs on the horizon. Signs, what does it mean signs? Because signs lead somewhere. Science leads somewhere. That's what signs are. Signs, when we're driving on the motorway, the signs lead us somewhere. If the sign was there for no reason whatsoever, it would be ridiculous. Okay, this is a sign for no reason whatsoever. People will say, why would anybody put a sign like that there for? So these signs, what do they lead to? They lead to a creator. They lead to Allah. وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, and in themselves, حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ, until it becomes absolutely crystal clear to them that أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ, that it is the truth, meaning that Allah is the truth, his existence. أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِ بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. So that's the empirical model. What about the rational model? And I've realized that I've not numbered that slide properly, have I? Because, this is one, and then I've called this one as well. Khair, you wouldn't have noticed it, if I didn't pick that out, so silly me to pick up my own faults. But khair, rational model. لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا فسبحان الله رب العرش عما يصفون. So we talk about, well, why should there only be one God? Why can't there be many gods? Why should we accept this one God theory? Well, God explains it, and Allah explains, he says, look, if there was another deity, another God in there, then there would be absolute chaos, absolute corruption, because each God would want to do whatever he wants to do. And if these two gods were equal, then in reality they're not God, because a God doesn't have an equal. A God is only a God when he's all-powerful, all-seeing. Otherwise he's not a God. So this is not using we can't observe this out in the world. This is just normal, rational argumentation now. So Allah SWT is using the rational model as well. Does this sound like blind following? Does this sound like anti-science? وَمَا خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاءَ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا لَاعِبِينَ. And we did not create the skies and the earth just as a plaything, that it had no purpose, or that it just came about by chance. لو أردنا أن نتخذ اللهو لاتخذناه من لدنا إن كنا فاعلين. And if we were to take something just as a pastime, then we would have taken something in our own presence. If we were to do that, we would never have created the earth and the world. Again, mentioned similar in the verse which follows. And the last two verses, أم خلقوا من غير شيء أم هم الخالقون. Were they created from nothing, or were they themselves the creators? That's left. If you deny Allah, if you deny God, then what's left? Either you created yourselves, which is ridiculous, so that can't be held, or you were created from nothing, which is as ridiculous. But again, I will touch upon that. Everything, but I will touch upon this in now, but I will touch it in more detail when we have our evolution series. But anything around you, that's me. If I said to you this, the phone that you have in front of you, or the laptop that you're looking at or viewing this on, was put about by chance. Basically, a lump of steel, a lump of this, and a lump of that, because I'm not really sure what a laptop is made up of, were just lying around, and due to the long passage of time, and due to survival of the fittest, and due to various causes, it so happened that the item, these pieces of metal, changed into a laptop. And the laptop had Word on it and Excel and everything else. Would you accept that? Would you believe that? No, you wouldn't. You would never believe that. You would never accept it as sound because it's rationally not sound. And let me even, sorry, I take the word believe out of there. It's not rationally sound. Everything we have around us has not come about by chance. Everything requires effort. Nothing comes from nothing. Okay? Antum takhluqunahu am nahnu al-khaliqun. Are you the ones who've created these things, or are we the creators? So we see that again, the Quran clearly is not speaking against the scientific process. And we have another أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ وَأَجَلٍ مُّسَمًّى وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ بِلِقَاءِ رَبِّهِمْ لَكَافِرُونَ. And do they not reflect and ponder on their own selves and that which Allah has created in the heavens and the earth, and that which is between them, which is with truth and a fixed time, but the majority of the people, in terms of meeting their Rabb, in terms of meeting their Lord, are lakafirun, in denial. So Allah, God, is asking us to reflect and ponder. Does this sound like blind following? Are there threats from God and threats that do accept that I exist, if not whatever? Yes, there are times when Allah will use that, and that's understandable. We use that when we're trying to convince somebody of changing their behavior. As a parent, if I want to change the behavior of my child, I will use all types of methodology to change their behavior. And times I will shout. At times I will tell them off, left with no choice. I will threaten, possibly taking things away from them, or threaten a little slap on the bottom or something. Obviously, my children are grown up now, so it'd be a bit embarrassing to slap them in that way. But the point that I'm trying to make is for a parent of a young child. So this is nothing different there. So clearly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not against the scientific process. So we've dismissed the view that science can replace God, because that doesn't even make sense. We've dismissed the view that the scientific process needs to replace religious texts, because the religious texts are inviting people towards thinking. So these are some bold statements. The new atheists are lying to us when they say religion is against scientific process. I hope I've shown that to you already. The new atheists are lying to us when they say that science should replace Allah, as we will soon see. Because what is science? How can that replace Allah? How do we worship science? And again, I've used the Arabic Allah, which is referring to God. New atheists lie when they say that scientists should replace religious scholars. Because scientists can't replace religious scholars. So if they're lying to us about all these three things, what is it they're really trying to do? Well, first of all, it screams, and that's me screaming, of hypocrisy. Screams of hypocrisy. It's doing no different than they claim what people of faith do, and they criticize and they ridicule and they have hatred for those particular people because of that, when they're doing exactly the same thing. No different. But before I go on to what is it that they're actually after, I want to touch upon this false dichotomy which exists and which new atheists push. They say science versus God, science versus religion, science versus Islam. Let's go with that. What do they mean by that? Rationality versus irrationality. Science is rational, it's sound. Religion is irrational, it's not sound. And that's where I get those words from. So science is sound, reasonable, and absolute. And Islam or religion, because we've been talking about Islam throughout this, right from slide 1, Islam, unsound, unreasonable, and speculative. But what they fail to realize is science leads to Islam. It's not a science versus Islam, because science is not in the same league as Islam. Islam is in a different league altogether. Islam is answering questions which science can't answer. All science is doing is leading us to the belief system of Islam, because we find enough evidence in here to believe what Islam is telling us. From that point, we become believers. And when we become believers, then we have to be taught how to worship. And science can't teach us how to worship. So science comes the earlier knowledge. It's the knowledge which is required in order to become a true sound believer. So we need this. That leads us to become a true sound believer in Islam. It then teaches us, meaning that we accept the general term of the existence of a God. Okay? Some people don't need science to accept that. Some people can accept the existence of a God straight away. That's fine. For some though, people now question more. People are more inquisitive. People are more curious. So they want to understand better. But eventually it leads them to God. Once they accept the belief in God, they now need to know how to please that God. They're not going to get that from science. I'm not going to get to know whether fasting in 1 month is more rewarding or fasting in Ramadan is more rewarding by science. I'm not going to get whether I should pray 8 times in the day or 4 times a day from science. In fact, science would say to me that pray 8 times in the day. Because the more I pray logically, the better it is. And science would tell me to fast in the shortest month in the year. Because I would be getting the reward of fasting and at the same time of conserving energy. So science would actually not lead us towards what God wants. We need him to tell us what he wants, which he does in his text. So empirical research and rational reasoning from a sound mind and a clean heart will lead to accepting Islam. Unless one is setting oneself as a God, then it's different. So if we did have a sound mind and a clean heart, then empirical research and reasoning is not taking us away from God and towards atheism. It is actually taking us towards God and theism, to believe in Allah. It will lead to a person accepting Islam. Unless obviously the motivations will change. And we've already seen from the slide previous that we should be very suspicious and very skeptical of what is the atheist after. And we see here that they are individuals who set themselves up as gods. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Do you not see those individuals who take his desire as a god? So let's see. But sadly, we've run out of time and I think I've gone way over. I was only supposed to deliver a 45-minute for part 1. But part 2 is, and I've picked a name there, Idol, I God, there is no God. So I hope you can join me for part 2 in which we answer those questions that I raised there, that who then is the God of the atheists. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, awwala wa akhirah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح وبث الدعاء الخفي الصريح يسعك الفضل